Hi, my name is Zach Penny. I am a physical education teacher in California, and this is a presentation about physical education that matters. The presentation starts talking about what physical fitness and physical literacy are, and then it ends with some practical applications about the methods for actually providing and developing physical literacy within students. There are timestamps in the description box if you'd like to skip through the presentation, as well as a link to the Google Slides where you can find some references and additional information. So let's talk about what physical fitness is. Physical fitness is a state of health and well-being, specifically as it relates to your ability to perform activities of daily living, occupational tasks, participate in sport, and non-competitive physical activities. So, activities of daily living are activities that allow you to take care of yourself. So, these are somewhat of the most basic levels of fitness that are like getting up and down from bed, being able to use the restroom, take a shower, get yourself dressed, brush your teeth, these types of activities. Occupational tasks are can go anywhere from being able to stand on your feet all day like a teacher, or maybe pick up a heavy object if you work in a grocery store or a warehouse, or all the way to if you are a firefighter or a police officer, you might need to chase somebody, jump a fence, or possibly run up a flight of stairs with a heavy hose over your shoulder. So, of course, some jobs require more physical fitness than others, but most occupations require at least some level of fitness. Fitness is also your ability to participate in sport. So, whether you are a student who's interested in joining a school sport team or an adult who wants to join a community rec league, generally sport participation requires a moderate to high level of fitness and even has an increased risk for injury because of the high intensity nature and complexity of sport participation. Non competitive physical activities are elective daily activities such as exercise and hobbies. For example, going to the gym or a yoga class to work out, maybe walking your dog, or going for a hike or a bike ride with your family, maybe going fishing, or renting a paddleboard at the beach are all examples of non competitive daily activities. Now let's take a closer look at some of the components that represent fitness. So we have health related components and skill related components. And I really like this image of a pyramid as it gets the point across that the health related components are really the foundation of the fitness pyramid, and they're that most basic level of fitness. So to tie it back to our descriptions earlier, if you're a teacher who needs to stand on your feet all day, you need some level of cardiovascular and muscular endurance. Or if you're a box boy in a warehouse, you need some level of flexibility to bend down and grab boxes, and then strength to pick them up and put them on the shelf. Or even if you're an elderly person who needs to get up and down from the toilet, you need some muscular strength for those activities. And those are the most basic levels of fitness. Now, as we move toward the skill related components, we're really focused in on maybe sport activities and high performance. So you might need some speed, power, agility. These are all elements that allow you to excel on the sport field. Or even like our example with the police officer chasing somebody, they're going to need some speed. They're going to need some power to be able to jump over the fence. If they're trying to grab somebody who's running away from them, they're going to need some agility. Think about security guards at a sporting event when somebody jumps on the field and they're running around. You always see a good example of agility because the person's trying to avoid the security guards and they need some agility to be able to grab them. So these relate to skill-related components of fitness. Now, each of these components represents some physical capacity within the body, and we can train these capacities. Now, I believe that a quality physical education curriculum not only engages students in the activities that develop these components, but also teaches students about each of these components. So, what it is, how to develop it, what are the methods, how does it relate to health, what are the benefits to health to developing this component, and how does it relate to sport performance?
So why fitness-based PE? And the answer is really simple. It's because the stakes are so high. So let's look at some of the consequences related to a sedentary lifestyle, which is really a marker of low fitness. So there's been a sharp increase in obesity rates since the 1970s. Today, 1 in 3 adults and 1 in 6 adolescents are obese. And let's compare that to the 1970s where 1 in 20 adolescents were obese. We're talking about adolescents from 5 years old to 19 years old. That's an increase from 5% to 18.5%. Now, worldwide, those numbers have increased tenfold since 1975, from 11 million adolescents to 124 million adolescents. And when you're obese, you're at an increased risk of dying from anything. That's all-cause mortality. And you're also at an increased risk for all of these chronic lifestyle-related diseases listed here. I want to point out decreased immune function as it relates to the coronavirus, which we've all been living through in this past year. The CDC reports that individuals who are obese are at a 3 times higher likelihood of being hospitalized and experiencing severe symptoms from the coronavirus. So that's just something that points out to the seriousness of it that's relevant to today. It also shows a lower quality of life in general. Heart disease, which is also you're at an increased risk of heart disease when you're obese, has been the leading cause of death in the United States for over 80 years, killing on average 600,000 people a year. And so it's been the leading cause of death since World War II. And when I look back to that time period, I think of television sets. I think of that time of American prosperity, the rise of fast food and companies like Coca-Cola. And really what happened in that time period was lifestyles became increasingly more sedentary, and the food we ate became more calorically dense but less nutritious. And it's really just highly processed foods. We see, like I said, fast foods and soda companies and really a sugar-based diet that came into play right around that time. There's also economic impacts. In medical care costs are in the billions of dollars each year, $147 billion, I believe, and that was a number from 2008. So you can only imagine what that is today. And that was 10% of the overall medical care costs. And so you can only imagine that it has increased since that time. And also lost opportunities. So 1 in 3 adolescents between the ages of 17 and 24 are ineligible for military service because of their body weight. And for some kids, military service might be one of the best things for them if they don't have other opportunities for, say, going to school, or their family doesn't have the resources to provide that for them. The military is a really great place to learn a lot of great life lessons that you wouldn't learn elsewhere, to get away from home and make new friends and learn life skills. And then when you're discharged, you have the GI Bill and you can go to school and finish, get a degree debt-free. And that was something I was lucky enough to benefit from. And so I know the opportunities that the military can provide for some people and what a good experience it can be. Although challenging, but you can really grow up in that time. So as equal to the severe consequences, there are profound benefits to living a physically active lifestyle that promotes fitness. And those benefits are both physical and mental. Of course, here it says maintain independence. So if we look back to what physical fitness is, and we talked about those activities of daily living, when you are more physically fit, you maintain independence for longer as you age. And if you look at the mental health, it says decreased risk of dementia. So you're also promoting just mental sharpness. Physical activity has also been shown to improve academic performance, which is important to us as educators. I think that it's interesting that the school day is just it's sitting down all day. It's highly sedentary if you look at it, and I think that there would be tremendous benefits from trying to incorporate more activity into a school day. I think that would help out students a bunch. And then you also look here, one of my favorite things here is it's physical activity has been shown to be as effective a treatment for depression and anxiety as pharmaceutical drugs. And I think that's huge because mental illness is just on the rise with youth today. And I'm really not a big fan of just prescribing pharmaceutical drugs. A lot of these kids get prescribed multiple drugs when physical activity is shown to be just as effective. I'm an advocate for promoting physical activity for that reason alone. But when you look at the host of benefits that come along with it, I think it's self-explanatory, the importance. So why fitness-based PE? It's because these chronic lifestyle-related diseases, they're preventable. They can be prevented, largely through learning about nutrition and physical activity. Obviously engaging in it, but also learning about it. And that's why I think a curriculum based on that is critical. Fitness is meaningful. So fitness-based PE is based around increasing physical literacy. So let's look at what literacy is. It's competence and knowledge in a certain area. So competence is being able to demonstrate those characteristics or skills. So you can show me, you can do it. Knowledge is the familiarity, awareness, and understanding of those concepts, methods, and terminology. So we're looking at factual knowledge. So you would know what the vocabulary terms are. You could recall that information. Conceptual knowledge is more like you could take those vocabulary terms and you know how they each relate to each other and affect each other. And then procedural knowledge is really you know how to do it. So in fitness terms, you might know the vocabulary of it, and then you know how the vocabulary relates to one another. And then procedurally, you could explain to me how you develop physical fitness. And that's kind of a breakdown of what I think the importance of PE is. So what is physical literacy? This is Shape America, which is the National Physical Education Association's definition of it. It's you're able to move with competence in a wide variety of activities, multiple environments that benefit the development of the whole person. Now, here are the three elements that I believe are the cornerstone of physical literacy. So, general movement skill competence. And so, really the idea here is we're building coordination. We're building proficient movers. We're building people that can, or we're developing people that can move really well. Because then when they go off to their sport team, say, if you already have a lot of coordination, you're going to be someone that can pick up on a sport skill quicker. And when I think of like what athleticism is, the word coordination is just hand in hand with athleticism. It's someone who has control over their body. They have that brain-body connection that when they want to do something and they initiate that movement in their brain, they're able to get their body to do exactly what they want it to do. And that's that psychomotor domain. And then we got development of personal fitness. So this one more has to do with the fitness components we talked about and developing each one of those components and assessing where an individual is at, and then just trying to help them get a little bit better each day, not to any one standard, but just get better than you were the day before. And I think that's important too, that we're individualizing it, so there's not just this one marker for, if you can do 10 push-ups, you are fit. But I think if you can go from 0 push-ups at the beginning of the year and you can end the year doing 1 push-up, man, that's fantastic. Like, you developed personal fitness, and that's exactly what I'm looking for. And that would be a great example of learning in physical education. And then the third element here is knowledge of fitness concepts, methods, principles, and terminology. So not just doing the activities, but actually knowing about them. Because I think that when students graduate, if someone has physical literacy, I'm imagining someone that knows how to take care of their body. They know the methods behind it. They know the terminology. They can do it. They have that knowledge base to where they can actually be empowered to develop or be responsible for the development of their physical fitness throughout their entire life. So here's a few questions to consider. Do sports benefit the healthy development of the whole person? So looking at Shape America's definition, it says, to benefit the healthy development of the whole person. And do sports benefit this? And my answer is yes, they do, but maybe for reasons that are different than what you might be thinking. I think the benefit of sport and physical education is really that social, emotional learning. It's positive peer interactions, and just enjoying physical activity. I think that's the value. It's not necessarily the knowledge about the sport or the competition itself, because not even all kids will enjoy competition, so I won't make them compete. But they can play a sport or practice a skill with their friends, and that's really what I think the value in PE is. And really, when you're looking at healthy development, if you remember the pyramid from the "What Fitness Is" slide, sports are at the top of the pyramid, and the bottom of the pyramid is really the foundation or the general physical preparedness that you need to even be ready to play sports. And so that's where I find the value in physical education is, especially as a strength and conditioning specialist. Today in our culture, we see a lot of kids who compete all the time, and there's this professionalization of youth sports, and it's just compete, compete, compete. And what we're seeing with that is we're seeing increased rates of injury, just a lot of kids being burnt out in general, and then increased injury rates, ankles, knees, concussions, things of that nature. When what we really need to do is be focused more on actually developing those foundational fitness qualities that will help prevent injuries in the future instead of over competing. Can a person be physically literate without being physically fit? I'm going to leave this one up to you. As I was going over these definitions, it was just an interesting question that crossed my mind.
So now we are in the practical application portion of the presentation. Let's start by looking at a daily period overview with a standard 60-minute class period. So it takes about 7 to 10 minutes for kids to dress out. And then we roll into a taking roll call. And now this is a time where I really want to eliminate downtime. So typically what you see is multiple PE classes on a blacktop. Each class has about 40 to 50 students. So we're looking at hundreds of students. And the longer it takes the teacher to take roll, the more unwanted behaviors we're going to see. So a strategy that I actually implement is I try to immediately get my class, find an area, designate an area for myself where I can take my class immediately to that area and go through the warm-up and take roll while they're engaged in the warm-up. And I find that that's a really effective strategy for eliminating unwanted behaviors and increasing engagement. So we do the dynamic warm-up. This can take 5 to 10 minutes depending on what we're doing, and we'll discuss that a little bit more coming up. After the dynamic warm-up, we go straight into a daily workout. Now, sometimes, depending on the workout, it could be a part of the dynamic warm-up, or it could be separate from it in a totally different area. Typically, that would be like some type of cardiovascular endurance exercise when I do my resistance training or muscular strength and endurance stuff within the dynamic warm-up itself. But I have a lot of different ways of doing that. And then we move into a skill practice. So if you look at my lesson plan here on the right, you can see that I have 4 levels, progressive levels of difficulty, where students will work on different skills and they'll work their way through those levels. And then once they complete those levels, they're able to move on to play a game. Unless they don't want to and they want to just continue working on skills and hanging out with their friends, that's fine too. Now notice on the right-hand side, I have progressions and regressions to everything. I have progressions and regressions to the workout as well as to the skills practice. And this just allows for differentiation and increased engagement. Now once that's all over with, of course, we dress back out for the students to move on to their next period. Now something I'd like to mention is, in my ideal situation, I like to have a classroom available to me to where at least one time a week I can provide some traditional instruction to facilitate some of that cognitive content that I've discussed so far, where I want to build and increase students' knowledge of fitness concepts, methods, and principles. Now we're going to look at the different parts of the lesson plan and how it addresses the different elements of physical literacy. So we're going to promote general movement skill competence through a comprehensive dynamic warm-up. Looking at the acronym RAMP, it's raise core body temperature, activate muscles, mobilize joints, and potentiate the nervous system. Now we're going to accomplish this through a series of locomotor and non-locomotor movements. The key element here is to progress these elements in complexity over time. A common mistake seen in many physical education classes is the same dynamic warm-up used day in and day out. Now, I believe this leads to a lack of engagement and boredom for students. A much more effective strategy is to incorporate one or two new movements or wrinkles of complexity week over week so that ultimately the dynamic warm-up at the end of the year looks much different and more complex than it did at the beginning of the year. And this really is representative of a dynamic warm-up that promotes the engagement of students and the development of coordination. Now, another critical feature to the dynamic warm-up is that it's highly structured. When you're teaching physical education classes of upwards of 50 students, it's critical to take advantage of this structured time of class. So not only will I complete the dynamic warm-up using this structure, but oftentimes my warm-up will flow naturally into a workout so that I can make the most and be more efficient with this time. The ultimate goal of the dynamic warm-up is to prepare the body for the activities that we'll do in class, as well as develop coordination. Now let's look at a dynamic warm-up progression. So the yellow box shows all the ways that we might increase the complexity over time. Now looking at the simple dynamic warm-up here in gray, that just shows a standard dynamic warm-up that we might be used to, that we would utilize in the first couple weeks of school. But over time, we want to start incorporating different elements to increase that challenge and continue engaging students. And that might look like this. So we're going from a standard forward skip to a backward skip, or we could even do lateral skips. And that's an example of adding multi-directional movements, right? So then we're taking our shuffle and we're adding some intensity and we're going to do power shuffles. We could take our back pedals, but now we're going to increase that intensity and we're going to back pedal as fast as we possibly can. Or we could do a combination movement where we're backpedaling and then we're making ourselves flip our hips, turn into a sprint. So that's really an example of combination plus intensity. And all of these just show that we're going to progress each movement to a more complex form to really promote coordination development as well as just increase that engagement. So again, we're taking a standard in-place squat and now we're going to do walking lunges, or a shoulder tap, which might be a regression to the push-up, and now we're actually doing push-ups. Or we're going from a very basic form of plyometrics with the ankle pogos, and then we're moving towards broad jumps and lateral hops. So it really just all points to we want to progress, and when students are able to demonstrate competence and then we increase that challenge, that's really an example of what learning looks like in physical education. The second element of physical literacy is the development of personal fitness, which I facilitate through daily workouts. A few key points here are appropriateness and variety. Appropriateness relates to differentiation, or providing accommodations for students with different ability levels. When I'm lesson planning, I have to consider students of low, moderate, and high fitness abilities in order to optimally challenge each and promote their physical development. Variety relates to utilizing multiple modes of training for each component. So for example, each week we will perform multiple cardiovascular endurance workouts, but none of those workouts will be the same. They'll all be different. And I believe this increases engagement and it increases enjoyment for students to be engaged in multiple different forms of activity and not always doing the same thing. And we'll talk about this more on the next slide. Goal setting and testing and measurement are critical features to the development of personal fitness. In order for a person to improve their fitness, they should understand their current fitness level and where they'd like it to be. And we'll accomplish this through ongoing fitness assessments, as well as students learning about and setting their own SMART goals. All of this data will be kept in a virtual fitness portfolio through Google Slides, where each student will be able to track their own progress and adjust their own goals. I also think that the process that leads to the development of personal fitness is a uniquely effective way to teach students the concepts of growth mindset and delayed gratification. Here are some examples of the various training methods that can be used to train each component of fitness. There are many benefits to providing variety, but a few are increasing student engagement through providing novel experiences. But a second is that it's supporting a fitness based curriculum so that when we're going through a unit, say the muscular endurance unit in the virtual portfolio, we can point to specific examples and students' prior experiences actually engaging in those workouts. Say a circuit or a Tabata workout, we can say, remember when you did that? How did you feel? Or what did we do? Can you recall the parameters for that workout? And secondly, it'll simultaneous to that unit of study. When we're in class, we'll be pointing to those workouts and we'll be saying, hey, this is a Tabata workout, and this is the vocabulary that was related to that unit of study, and this is practically how that works. And all of that does is reinforces the knowledge of the concepts, principles, and methods of training.
Our third and final element of physical literacy is knowledge of fitness concepts, methods, principles, and terminology. And as you've heard me mention, the way that we are going to accomplish this is through our virtual fitness portfolio. So let's just go ahead and take a look at what I'm talking about. So each student in the Google Classroom would be assigned this document. Obviously, there would be a unit. There would be multiple units, one for each component of physical fitness. I have a fitness foundations unit and so forth, just important topics to discuss in physical education. So here's a little rundown. So it obviously is going to start with vocabulary so that we're all on the same page about the terminology that we're using. And so I would give, this is a teacher copy, I would assign a blank copy to the students. And then also I put sources in the notes section of these Google Slides so that the students have the sources that they'll need. Now, as you've heard me discuss previously, um, one day a week, ideally, I would have the students go into a classroom to work on this in small groups, as well as just to provide any additional instruction that I might need to provide. But in a traditional physical education setting, students are dressed out in their PE uniform and all of their belongings are in the locker room. And so, really, PE teachers oftentimes have to rely on just lecture. And I really don't. I want to take that time when we're outside in PE for increasing physical engagement. And I just don't think that lecture for most kids is the best way to learn. So that's why I would like to dedicate one day a week inside of a classroom to kind of hit on all these points. So that's the vocabulary. And then each unit has an understanding section where this is basically the 5 questions that are asked. What parts of the body are involved? How does the body adapt to consistent cardiovascular endurance training? What are the health benefits? How does cardiovascular endurance improve sport performance? And how can it be tested and measured? I think these are all really important concepts for a physical education curriculum, especially when you compare it to things like knowledge of sports rules and the game, the playing field and the dimensions and the different skills. I honestly think that those things don't really have a lot of value, whereas these concepts have tremendous value. So here we have our methods. So basically a sheet teaching students, we're going to put their resting heart rate in here, show them the Carbonian formula and how that they can determine their training heart rates that they want for different, 50 to 70%, which would be characterized as moderate intensity and vigorous intensity. Basically, how can you calculate your own heart rate? And then it's right here on this sheet that they'll have as long as they want to keep it. And then again, rate of perceived exertion. And then we have, let me back out of this. You can see that it's an interactive, it's an interactive sheet where the students can grab these boxes and drag them over to the appropriate spot and just work on these different things. And they're being exposed to all these different training methods for improving cardiovascular endurance, as well as actually engaging in those activities in class. So I think this is a really effective strategy for teaching all of the knowledge portion of the fitness curriculum and fitness literacy. Let's get back into this. So what about sports and games? As you saw on my lesson plan, I don't neglect them. It's just not a part of my curriculum necessarily. So we will have a tiered skill practice as we discussed, and there'll be differentiation to make it modifications to be easier or more difficult depending on what students need. And I really have an emphasis on discovery learning. So there's going to be, there are physical education classes that kind of center around critical elements of a sports skill. So let's say the overhand throw, where you would go over, each little point and break the overhand throw down, and you would just say, okay, you have all these different points that you need to hit in order to have a proficient overhand throw. Instead of doing that, I want to allow students to just go out and do what feels natural to them, build on past experiences, use their intuition. How do you feel like throwing? What feels good to you? Use your imagination and creativity. I think that's really where valuable and important, or I should say, impactful learning can take place. I don't think that we need to micromanage a student's skills, because if a student really wanted to get good at a sport, they could join that sport where the sports coach would teach them how to do the skills for that sport. But who am I to tell a student how they should throw a ball? And of course, I mean, I just don't think it's that important that I teach you that skill necessarily, how I think you should do it. I think it's actually really good for students to be able to just do what feels natural to them and have fun and not overthink these skills. And then also, I just think, again, I'll reiterate that I think that the main purpose of these sports and games and PE is just fun and positive experience with friends. I don't think that PE is for making uh, improving athleticism necessarily. I don't think that's the main point of it. I think it's improving students' fitness and their knowledge of fitness, and not necessarily making them into athletes, to which there are already sports teams throughout the school at all schools that can do that and serve that purpose. But again, I'm more focused on improving fitness. So this would be, again, we saw the tiered practice and how there's, one levels 1 through 4, and students will be able to move through that at their own pace. And whether they want to move on to gameplay or continue practicing skills is up to them, and they have that autonomy and that choice. And these are just a few non-traditional examples of that, that are outside the common football, basketball scenario. So just a review of what we went over, the profound health benefits of being physically active and developing physical fitness. It's critical in this day and age with all the chronic lifestyle diseases that we are experiencing as a country and as a human race altogether. We want to empower students with physical literacy. We want them to improve their general movement skill competence. We want them to be better movers. We want them to develop personal fitness and not just engage in these things, but know how to improve it. They actually have the knowledge so that they're empowered to move forward after high school or after school, and really take ownership over their own physical fitness. And then sports and games, they fall into this equation where we're just really trying to facilitate fun and enjoyable experience. Thank you for tuning in to my presentation about physical education that matters, a pragmatic, fitness-based approach to PE in secondary schools. If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to reach out. If you enjoyed the presentation, please throw a like on it and maybe share it with your network. Thanks again.